I'm down in the Kidron Valley. That's a very famous valley in the Bible. It plays a role in some of the Old Testament stories and the New Testament stories. Remember, David escaped from Absalom by crossing the Kidron. Jesus crossed the Kidron as he went into the Garden of Gethsemane. We know those details. And today it's the very bottom part of the Mount of Olives. And so all you have to do is leave the old city of Jerusalem, walk down in the valley, and you're basically starting to climb the Mount of Olives. And this is also where you're going to find thousands upon thousands of tombs. Thousands of them belong to the modern era, and you can tell which ones they are. But then there are those that date back to the time of Christ and even before. And there's a tomb here that we can go in and explore. There's no bodies lying here anymore, but it dates back to that time period just before the New Testament, the Hasmonean period. And we're going to go in there, and I'd like to show you a couple of things. So let's go explore the tomb of a Hasmonean priestly family. Well, one of the things you notice immediately about this tomb is that it took a lot of money to have it constructed. This tomb belonged to a priestly family. So I want you to connect a couple of dots. Most of the tombs on the Mount of Olives, the newer ones, the older ones, the ancient tombs, they're very simple. But this one is very, very elaborate. The family wanted you to know that we're important, that we've got a lot of money. Well, this tomb belonged to a priestly family. It may not sound like scandal, but it really is. John the Baptist was constantly preaching about the corruption in the temple in Jerusalem, and he thought it was scandalous at the vultures that were running the business of religion at the temple. The fact that a priestly family would have a tomb like this is evidence that they had a lot of money, and it's evidence that all that corruption was making them rich. Hey, remember what Jesus did the last week of his life? He goes into the temple and he starts turning over the tables of the money changers, driving out the animals. He didn't like the corruption that was there either. He didn't like the fact that the priest, the chief priest, the high priest had turned this whole thing of religion into a money-making endeavor. And this tomb reminds me of all that money and how much Jesus really didn't like it, and that could be troubling for our culture in certain places too. You know, another thing about the tomb, this tomb and all the other tombs that are on the Mount of Olives, just pay attention to geography. These tombs are on the eastern side of the city. When bodies decompose, well, they have a horrible odor. The wind in Israel blows constantly from the Mediterranean across Jerusalem. It blows from the east to the west. And so by putting so many tombs on the eastern side of the city, on the Mount of Olives, people were taking care of a practical need. The odor would be blown away from the city and not over the city. You know, and one of the things that I love to see here is that from a practical aspect, this opening needs to be covered. You don't want thieves to come in and steal anything valuable. You don't want animals to come in. You want to make this place, well, kind of sacred. And so the cover, there needed to be a cover over the entrance. And the most famous story in the Bible, the one we love the most, talks about the tomb of Jesus, how the stone was rolled into place after Jesus was laid in this borrowed tomb. And then on that glorious resurrection morning, it was rolled away so that we could go in and see that Jesus was not there. And that's the message of good news. That's the message of Jerusalem, the constant message that Jesus was crucified, laid to rest in a borrowed tomb, and then raised to new life so that you and I could have that same life. In the Kidron Valley in Jerusalem, I'm Andy Cook.